It's Bible Club, it's Bible Club, it's Bible Club in our town. There's singing, there's laughing, let's get the word on the ground. We're all excited, and we are all delighted. It's Bible Club, Bible Club, Bible Club, Bible Club, Bible Club in our town. So, what is, the verse has a lot of different things in it, but there's one idea in it that we are paying extra attention to for the last 3 weeks and this week. What is it about God that we're learning from our verse? What is it about God that we're learning from our verse? What is it? There's a lot of things that we could learn.
Jackson knows.
What is it that we're learning? You know, Jackson?
I know.
What?
He knows. God.
What? She's not going to say it for you. You got to say it. What about God?
God knows all things.
God knows all things. That's right. God knows everything. And there's a big word, older kids in the room, there's a big word that means all knowledge. Or has all knowledge. What is that word? I don't have it. It's not showing here anywhere. So Silas, don't say anything. Silas thinks he knows. Cody is offering an answer. Ian, do you know? Don't say it. Do you know? You don't remember? Kaylee, do you remember? You have not been able to be here the last week or two or something during these lessons, right?
Oh my.
Yeah, it starts with an O. It starts with an O. Omni something. Omni something. Cody? Omniscient. Omniscient. And the S-C-I-E-N-T, shint, not omniscient, that means knowledge. You know, the word science is about knowledge. Science is knowledge. So, omniscient means all knowledge. And when we say God is omniscient, that means God has all knowledge. Or God knows everything. Okay, I just had a silly question. So this silly question, does anybody know when God finally learned everything?
Is that a trick question?
It could be a trick question. Is that a trick question? When did God finally learn everything? What do you say in Genesis? Silas? Never. He never finally learned everything because he has always known everything, right? God always, so nothing surprises God. He knows everything. In our story, there was a lot of surprises, wasn't there? There was even some secrets, wasn't there? But God is never surprised, and He's never learned anything. We have to learn things all the time, but God has never learned anything. That's a funny way to think about it, right? Well, is there something God can't do? He can't learn anything. Because He already knows everything. So He can't learn anything. So, in our story is about, who can tell me some names of people in our story? Remember some names of people in our story. Just tell me one. What's one of the names in our story? Nicholas? Not this story. That's a different story. Silas? Esther. Esther is one of the ladies in our story. She's probably the main lady in the story. I mean, that's why they named the book after her, right? So there's Esther. Another name of a person. Mordecai. All right. So who are Mordecai and Esther are related, right? What's their relationship? Chloe?
Cousin.
They're cousins, but it's a little bit different type of cousin relationship, right? You remember? So how do they treat each other? They're related by cousins, but how do they treat each other?
He was his dad.
Right. Esther treated Mordecai like he was her dad, and Mordecai raised Esther like she was his daughter because her parents were dead. Right? So she didn't have parents, and her cousin, some people call him an uncle, but I don't think he's an uncle, but uncles do this too. Her cousin raised her. So what's some other names or other people in our story? Cody. Who? Haman. That's right, Haman. So in our story, Esther and Mordecai, they're the good guys, right? And Haman, he's a bad guy, right? He's a bad guy. What are some bad things? Can you think of any bad things that Haman did? You say he's a bad guy. What did he do? Or what did he want to do?
He didn't want to worship that man.
Okay, that's the other way around. Mordecai did not worship the bad guy. Yeah, Haman. Right, so that's a good thing. But you remember that. Let's give Silas a chance and then see what Cody can fill in. Silas? Some bad things that Haman wanted to do.
He wanted to kill Haman.
He was Haman.
He wanted to kill
Esther's. You're right. Esther's what?
cousin.
Esther's cousin. Yeah, and how is he going to do that? On the big gallows, right?
Down the gallows.
Yep, he was going to kill. He's going to kill Mordecai.
And Haman.
And what were some other things that he wanted to do, Cody?
Silence said what I was going to say.
Okay. Did he want to kill anybody besides Mordecai?
No.
So we have a yes and a no.
No.
Did he want to kill anybody beside Mordecai? Chloe.
Yes.
All the Jews, not just Mordecai. All the Jews, and so he got permission to kill all the Jews, didn't he? He sent the king's command to all the provinces, Aaron, all the provinces in the kingdom, in the Persian Empire. I said this probably a long time ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago. Does anybody remember how many provinces there were? All the way from India to Ethiopia? How many provinces were there? Does anybody remember that? I'm going to tell you again. 127 provinces. So there was Jews living in all of those different provinces all across the empire. And so Haman sent letters saying that all the Jews should be killed. Do you remember when all the Jews were supposed to be killed? Or how Haman figured out when they should all be killed? Aaron, what do you remember? No, it was not the 24th. No. We're not just going to guess numbers. Do you have any idea? Does he know anything?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, what? Yeah. Ian. In the 12th month. Do you remember which day of the 12th month? You don't? Do you remember? No. The number day. It was the 13th day of the 12th month. Do you remember how they figured out? How did they figure it out? They rolled a dice. And in those days, listen, we call it a dice, but in another language, it would have another name, right? Let's just see. Miss Megan, do the Mongolians have dice? Something that they would cast? Do you know what they call it? You don't remember? Does anybody else know another language? A Shah? Okay, so if she was telling this story in Mongolia, she would say that Haman cast the Shah. Okay, we say that he rolled dice. What they called it is they rolled a pur. P-U-R. Pur. Okay, they called it a pur. So they rolled the pur and figured out that would be the 13th day of the 12th month. Now, how far off was that day? From when he got permission to kill him, then he figured out it would be that day. How far off? How many months down the road was it that they were going to be able to prepare to kill the Jews? Does anybody remember that? Silas, do you know? Nope. You're guessing.
5.
No, it was even more. 10 months. It was 10 months off, and then the things in our story took place, right? Esther went before the king, even though she couldn't go before the king, and she asked the king for a banquet. And who's going to go to the banquet? Esther and the king and the evil Haman. But did the king know that Haman was evil?
No.
No. So they went to the banquet, and the king said, "Oh, Esther, you have found favor in my sight, and I will give you anything up to half. Half of the kingdom I'll give you." And Esther said, "King, just come back tomorrow," right? She was practicing for telling stories at Bible Club. She said, "Oh, King, come back tomorrow." And Haman was all excited because he got to come back to the second banquet. The king got to go back to the second banquet, and that night, between the banquet that night and the next night, two things happened. Haman decided that he was going to kill Mordecai on the gallows, right? He said, "I'm not waiting 10 months. Mordecai has to go. He just makes me so angry." And the same night, the king could not sleep, remember? He couldn't sleep. And so he had him read the history books to him, because history is, he must not have liked history. I like history, but he didn't like history or something. So he's trying to go to sleep, and the guy's reading, and he remembers and finds out that Mordecai had saved his life and had never been rewarded, and so he wanted to reward Mordecai. So the king wants to reward Mordecai, and Haman wants to kill Mordecai, and what happened? Haman came to ask the king if he could kill Mordecai, and the king said, "What should I do to somebody that I want to honor?" And Haman said, "You should put him on your horse in your royal robes and have an important man lead him around the city." And so the king said to Haman, "Get Mordecai and lead him on my horse in my robe yourself around the city." And then after all that, Haman went to the second banquet, and Esther told the king that somebody was trying to kill her and all of her people. And the king was very upset and said, "Who is this person that would try to kill you and all of your people?" And she said, "What? It's Haman." And what happened to Haman at the end of last week's lesson?
He got killed.
He did. He got hung on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. And so, there's still a problem, isn't there? In the Persian Empire, when the king made a law, it could not be changed. When the king's ring sealed the law of the Medes and Persians cannot be changed, and there was a law, wasn't there? There was a law that said, in the 12th month, on the 13th day, everybody that wants to should kill all the Jews and take all their property and all their money for yourself. And people were getting ready to do that. Now, God knew that it would take some time for all this, so he made sure it was 10 months off when that law started, was set. And now this takes place, Haman was killed about 2 months later, 2 or 3 months later. So there's still 6 months, 7 months, but there's a law. And so Esther went before the king again. She went before the king again. Let's get that picture when she's going before the king. Where is that picture? Oh, it's right here. She went before the king again and said, "Oh, king, there's still a problem." And he said, "What is the problem? I've given you all of Haman's house. He's dead. What is still the problem?" She said, "The law is still the problem. The law still says that the people across the kingdom in all 127 provinces are supposed to kill my people, the Jews, on the 13th day of the 12th month." And so the king said, "Well, I can't change the law." Even the king could not change the law that he had made. But he said, "I can give Mordecai my ring, and he can write another law." And so that's what they did. They wrote another law. So the first law said, everybody that wants to should kill all the Jews they can find and take their houses, take their money, take their animals, take everything they are. We want to get rid of all the Jews. And Mordecai wrote a law, and he sealed it with the king's ring. And this law said that on the 13th day of the 12th month, all the Jews should take their swords and fight for their lives and kill anybody that's trying to kill them. So before, the law said that they couldn't defend themselves. But this law said that they could defend themselves. And so, the months went by, and on the 13th day of the 12th month, all the Jewish people banded together, and they protected themselves, and they defended themselves, and they did kill. Well, the law said that they could take anything from the people that tried to kill them. But they killed all the people that tried to kill them, but they did not take their lands and their houses. They just defended themselves. And the Bible says 75,000 people across the kingdom of Persia were killed on that day. 75,000 people tried to kill the Jews that day, and the Jews did not die. They defended themselves. None of the Jews died. They killed all those people that tried to kill them. Now, 75,000 sounds like a big number, but I like numbers. So I thought, what is 75,000 divided by 127? And it's a little over 500. So across all those provinces, there was not a lot of people. It was just a giant, large kingdom. In the capital city, 800 people between that day and the next day. 800 people tried to kill the Jews, and they lost their life against the Jews who were defending themselves. And across the kingdom, 75,000, about 500 in each province. And a province is like a state. So if there was 5 cities in a state, there's maybe only 100 people in each state. But they were trying to kill the Jews, and the Jews had permission from the king to defend themselves. Now, after that, when they got the law, when they got this law from that Mordecai was able to write, they feasted and they celebrated because they knew they were going to be able to defend themselves. After this day of defending themselves and killing all their enemies, they had a celebration. The day before, they didn't know whether they would be alive today, but now they were alive. God helped them, and they got rid of their enemies, and so they had a feast. And Mordecai made another law. Mordecai and Esther made another law. They wrote 2 letters. The Bible talks about 2 letters. And they sent it throughout the kingdom to all the Jews, and to all the Jews they were supposed to remember every year. They were supposed to, when it got to be the 14th day and the 15th day of the 12th month, they were supposed to celebrate how that their lives were spared and they were kept away or kept safe from evil Haman's plan. And so the next year, on the 14th day and the 15th day of the 12th month, they had a celebration. And the next year, they had a celebration. And they called the days the Feast of Pur. Why do they call it Pur? Because that's what the dice was. Haman rolled the dice. And Pur is a dice, it's a dice, and Purim is more than one dice. So it's the Feast of Purim. And even today, not this day, but for the Jewish people, on the 14th day and the 15th day of their 12th month, it's not December, but of their 12th month, they celebrate the Feast of Purim. The little kids, will write the name of Haman on the bottom of their shoes, and then they will stomp their feet to stomp out the name of Haman, who tried to destroy their people a long time ago. They make pastries that they say represent the head of Haman, Haman's hat. They read the book of Esther. And they remember how God protected them from all the evil plans of Haman. And I think they remember how God has protected them from the evil plans of a lot of people down through history. Now, the book of Esther, I want to tell you something about the book of Esther. It's different than every other book in the Bible. The name of God is not in the book of Esther. You can read from the very first word to the very last word, and you will not see the name of God in the book of Esther. But is God in the book of Esther? Who could do all the things that happened in Esther's life? Could anybody? God, we look at that, and what do we see? We see God knows everything, right? And we also see what we learned the time before, that God is sovereign. Remember what God is sovereign means? God controls, God is always in complete control of everything, everywhere. Is God control of Haman?
Yeah.
He let Haman make that law, but then he made sure that the king heard about what Mordecai did, right? Did he let Haman kill Mordecai?
No.
God didn't let Haman kill Mordecai. God knew all of it was taking place, and he was in control of it all. And even though his name is not there, there's not a better story in the world for us to read to see how God works for his people and in people's lives. So even though we don't see his name there, we know he was there. And you know what we learned from that? Something that we learned from that is, even though in our lives, at our homes and in our school, wherever we are, we might not see the name of God very much. Like if you go to public school, I never got to go to public school, or I never went to public school. So in my school, we went to chapel, and we learned about God every day in school. But I bet in Calumet New Tech or Lake Ridge New Tech, you're not learning about God every day in school, are you? Okay, his name is not there. But is he there? Oh, yes, he is. God is everywhere. Does he know what's going on there? Yep, God knows everything. He's in control. You might say, what's going on in my life? Why are my circumstances this way? I wish they were another way. This doesn't make any sense, but does it make sense to God? And can God turn everything that happens out for his own good? Yes. So we should remember that. Whatever it is that we're facing in our life, how old you are, how young you are, well, I did that wrong. How old you are, how young you are, where you go to school, where you live, all of that God knows about, and God has a plan for you in that. He might not, in fact, I know he doesn't want any of you ladies to be the queen of Persia. That job's been taken already, right? But he does have a job for you. He has something he wants you to do. And so you have to obey the Bible and obey him so that whatever job he has for you, you are doing it. And he can use you. You can look back. Right when you're doing it, you're just like, I'm just going to do what's right. But then when you think back about what happened in your life, you will be able to look back and see, when I did what was right, God used that in a special way in somebody else's life or in your life. And so I want to encourage you to determine to be faithful, to determine to always obey God and live for God no matter where you are and no matter what is said around you. Even if you're in a place where God's name isn't said very often and people don't think about God very often, you can still live for God wherever